Okay, so for this setup, I'm going through a DI box. This is my DI box of choice. It's the MXR M80 base DI, but you don't need to use a DI box. If you do want to use a DI box, any DI box will do, but you could also just plug straight into your interface. So just to run you through with what this is doing is I'm plugging from the base into my DI box. This is adding a little bit of color in here, and then I've got an XLR going out and into my interface. But what I've also got is this, which is a parallel output or link output, which is going straight into the interface itself. So like I said, you don't need to have a DI box. I could just plug the bass straight in, but I'm going to go for this kind of two-channel sound. And what I'll do is I'll show you that kind of the two-channel approach, even just straight off of the straight-in jack. So firstly, we've got to get a good tone out of the bass. I'm using our college recording bass here, which is Sterling by Music Man. It has a really nice sound, DI straight off of the pickups. But what you want to do is just spend a couple of minutes listening to the track, and just kind of tweaking your tone controls. Make sure you've got enough string noise kind of coming off of the bass, or not enough depending on kind of the tone that you're going for. You want to at least make sure that whatever you're recording in DI sits kind of all right with the drums and bass as it stands. So I'll just have a quick listen to how my tone's sitting now. I'm happy with my sound, enough string noise in there, so I've got a tiny bit of attack in it. Obviously with this type of track, it's mostly kind of that low end bass that we want in there, but it's gelling quite nice already before I've mixed it, which obviously no matter what we're recording, if it already sounds nice in the mix before we've had to mix it, then we're starting off well. Now I've got my tone sorted, I can spend some time tracking the bass, getting that nice and tight, make sure I've got a good quality take or two, and then we're going to have a look at how to crack on with the mix. So when we left off, I just started laying down some bass. The tracks are here. So let's have a listen to how they sound. I'm just going to also solo the drums, keys and guitars so we get a bit of an idea of how it's sounding in the mix. Okay, so not bad. It's a little bit muddy at the moment. So what I want to show you is just a few tips and tools that we can do using just Logic stock plugins to treat this and make it sit a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is obviously have a quick listen to how my two different tracks sounded out. So I've called this one Bass Amp, even though it's not really an amp. This is more the DI track. And then this one was through the MXR. So I know this one's probably going to be the preference. MXR tends to add a little bit of colour and a bit of brightness to it. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. It's still a bit muddy. And that one's got a little touch of string noise in there as well. So let's have a look at how to treat those. So the reason I've called this one Bass Amp is because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to Amps and Pedals and chuck this Bass Amp Designer on it. And you can get a few different plugins for Bass Amp emulation. The Ampeg one's pretty good. The Mark Bass one's pretty good. But if you're just using stock plugins, then this one, the built-in one into Logic's actually pretty decent as well. So I'm going to go up here to the presets and roll through some. Now I know I quite like this one called Deep because of the style, that reggae style. I want that proper low end in the bass, so I could try and give this one a run, see how it sounds. Ooh, okay, probably a bit too heavy on the bass, but I can roll it off using these amp controls. Okay, rolling that treble up gives me a little bit more of the string noise on there. Okay, have a listen, give me the DI. Okay, it's starting to sound nicer already now that we've got a little bit more of that top end in there. So what I'm going to aim for now, firstly, is to get rid of some of the muddier frequencies that are in this bass track that I can hear now. So I'm going to start with my DI track. And what I'm going to do is boost to cut. So I'm going to narrow my cue down, and I'm going to look for the frequency I don't want, which I think is around here. So that's my proper low end. Yeah, this kind of area here. I don't need to take loads away, just a little bit. What I'm going to do is also, I'm going to pop a little high pass filter on here as well. Not too high, kind of 40 hertz-ish. Quite a steep roll off. It shouldn't make any massively audible difference unless you're listening on like a really big system. It's just to get rid of any of that low end, proper low end energy. So now I've done a touch of cleaning in here. Now I've played pretty well, I think, on this, so I don't think it's going to need much compression. What I'm firstly going to look for here is to not compare, but A/B my bass track here with my drums, because what I want is my kick drum to punch through, and I want to be able to hear that kind of low end in my bass track as well. Now, it changes from style to style. If you've got kind of more slap bass or funky bass, you don't really need that proper low end, that sub end in the bass. So you can feel free to kind of take a bit more of that away and allow a bit more of the low end of the kick drum, sub end of the kick drum through. Whereas in this style of music, I'm really looking for the kind of sub end in the bass guitar to cut through. So it doesn't sound too bad, but my kick drum is starting to sound a bit papery, where the bass guitar is taking away most of those low end frequencies that I want out of my kick drum. So I'm going to go onto my kick drum track here, and what I'm going to do is have a quick listen for the kind of low end frequency or the main area of punch that I can find in my bass drum. So all I'm going to do is chuck channel EQ on here, have a listen, and I'm going to boost. So this seems to be kind of the main meat of my bass drums down here around 60. Now you can generalize with bass drums because you have different sizes, different microphones and stuff. It's kind of good just to peek up there and just see what's doing. So I've got my 60 hertz there in my bass drum. So now what I'm going to do is, on my bass track here, is just pull away just a little bit, not loads, so we can tighten our cue right up. Oh, help if I was using the right type of filter here. We're going to tighten that cue right up, and we're just going to roll down to 60 or around there and just take a little bit away, just a few dB away, and just let that clarity kind of come through. Now I'm going to copy this EQ setting over onto my amp setting here and have another listen. Already starting to sound nice. Now what I want to do is get a rough level for my bass, and then now that I've done my kind of taking away, is to start just adding a little bit of color into the bass track so that it starts to have its own kind of place in the mix. So I'm going to take my subgroup here down to the bottom, so no bass. Listen to the track. I'm going to roll it in. Okay, not bad. Now, I'm going to work on both of these tracks at the same time because I've got a nice little sound in between both of them. So they're both coming out of my bass group here. So first thing I'm going to do is pop on a compressor. Nice and basic. Like I said, I don't want to really increase the volume here. All I'm doing is trying to kind of squeeze together the two different tracks and level them out. So I'm going to start with a ratio kind of 4:5 to 1, and then I'm just going to roll this down until my needle kicks in a little bit. Here we go. Just a little bit, a couple of decibels, and then make up those couple of dB as well. Starting to sound nice. Bit of EQ in here. Again, roll off some of the sub lows. There's my string. Touch of that in there. Winning. So that's it. That's everything I'm going to do in terms of using my stock plugins. So I've got my bass amp designer on here, and what I can do is kind of, as I'm listening to the track, is use the EQ in here to add a little bit of color, a bit more string if I want, a little bit more low end if I need it. But there you go, touch of EQ to remove, let the bass drum through, touch of EQ on the bus channel, just to kind of boost up the areas that I want my bass to kind of cut through the mix a little bit. And then I've got my bass amp designer on there and a touch of compression. Now I've got like a rough idea of this. What I'm going to want to do is move over onto some speakers, some headphones or something where I can kind of really start to pick out the low mids, and then I'm going to start to really kind of EQ and work with those so that I can try and make sure that my bass, the kind of low mids of my bass aren't clashing with my keys, aren't clashing too much with my snare drum. But that's a whole thing in itself. For now, that's a great way to start, or a great place to start with our bass mixing. Enjoy.